Good morning, it's brew day here at Wheatlow Brewery and it's early, it's 4 something in the morning, still a bit dark and we're bright and early today because we're excited to brew a Verset Farmer Märzen or a cattle Märzen in English. So this is I've never brewed a Märzen before. It's traditionally, I think, brewed in March to be drunk in October at the Oktoberfest, and it's a lager. It's a German lager beer that has a low hopping level and normally a bit more colour to it. So it should be quite interesting. And if we're going to do an array of Oktoberfest beers, you need a Festbier, probably a Weizen, and a Märzen. It gives you something a bit more malty and a bit sweeter, so you've got a balanced portfolio of beer for your Oktoberfest. So it's a style I haven't done before, so I'm really excited to try it. I'm using malts I've never used before. So for the malt bill, we're using a special heritage malt called Barke malt from, which I think is the Barley variety, from Weyermanns. So we're using Barke Pilsner, first of all, Barke Munich 1, which is 34% early, Barke Pilsner malt, which is 27%, Barke Vienna malt, which is 20%, and then Cara Hell 6.8%, Cara Red 6.8%, and Cara Munich 2 5.1%. So I guess the idea of that is to give you quite a layered malt taste with some caramel notes, some biscuitiness, some body. Should be really interesting beer. It's a malt-forward beer. And thanks for this recipe. The credit goes to Lance Blackman. I think he's won some awards with this beer in the past, and he very kindly passed the recipe on to me. So thanks for that, Lance. Hope I can do your beer justice. So I'm going to get mashed in now. We're going to do a decoction mash. The broad aim of the decoction mash is to get an initial rest at 54. Use decoction to get it up to about 65, and then use decoction to get it up to about 74 to mash out. So I'm going to get cracking and then come back and talk about the water. So for the water profile on this, just going for a basic low mineral lager type water. I think it's 50 parts per million calcium, 5 magnesium, 10 sodium, and then balanced sulfates, chloride, both about 50 parts per million. So this is the first addition for the mash. Going in. We'll start mashing in. Right, for the yeast, for this beer, Lance recommended the East Coast yeast, Calabier liquid yeast, I think a Czech style yeast, but unfortunately we can't get that. And so we've had to just consider a lager yeast of a German style that will be suitable for this. And bear in mind that we want this to be ready reasonably quickly. It's mid-August now. September the 20th is the official date for Oktoberfest. That doesn't, it's not exactly brewing it in March for October, is it? So I'm going to use a yeast that I know and that I know is reliable, that will drop reasonably quickly and reliably, and that is this one, the Weyermanns strain 3470, W3470 from Fermentation. So I've made this starter and I'm going to pour this yeast in now and get it going a little bit before we pitch it as well, so we get a nice healthy fermentation, and then we'll leave that to get going whilst we do the brew day. Now, I did a bit more reading whilst I was mashing about the Barke malt, B-A-R-K-E, and it is a heritage malt, and it's Weyermann's product. and it's seen as generally regarded as a higher quality than the normal ones, which I didn't realise was possible. For example, Weyermanns floor malted Pilsner malt is one of my favourite malts. Use it for Hellers and Pilsner, things like that, and you get a lovely honey quality when you use that malt. Apparently with the Barke Pilsner malt, we're going to get a little bit more wholemeal bread kind of character. So that's interesting, because that's exactly what I thought could smell when we were doing the decoction mash. So I've looked up most of the descriptors for these various malts in here, and they're all using words like brown bread, toast, some caramel, things like that, and maltiness. So it's going to be a lovely malt-forward beer. Different to what a lot of people going really hoppy these days, aren't they? So it's nice for a change to have a beer that emphasises the malt. So yes, that bit of research got me even more excited about this one. The smell of that Caramunic 2 going in, it's amazing. Toasty, like toast. Yeah, it's not burnt toast, but just done toast. Cara Red now. Never used that before. Also Weyermanns. That's more interesting smell, more sophisticated than the toast from the Caramunic Malt 2. Right, temperature is 54 of the mash, and we're going to start the decoction process, which is just taking a portion out and boiling it. And decoction will activate the Maillard reaction, which will give us melanoidins, which are basically the brown bits on food that taste unctuous, and it'll add something to the taste that will give it extra qualities. And it'll help us reach our next step temperature. Some brewers hate it, think it's too much hassle and lengthens the day. But I think it's pure brewing, just interacting with the brew like this. Right, let's check the pH. 5.4 it is, which is actually within the range of being okay, but I always like to get it to 5.2 because when you add the sparge water and the hops and things like that, well, certainly the sparge water, it's likely to go up a bit, so I always keep it at the lower end. So I'm adding just 22 ml of lactic acid just to get it to 5.2. So if I give that a stir and retest, if my calculations are correct, that 22 ml of acid will change the pH in here from 5.4 to 5.2. I'll let it circulate a bit and then we'll test it again. So I'll just cool it down to 20 degrees to get the accurate reading. What you find with this kind of thing is that if you don't get the reading that you want, that you've calculated should be the case, what I do is now is not believe it and just check it again, i.e. take another sample because perhaps it hasn't mixed enough or something. if we start chucking more acid in because we don't think it's hit it before taking a second measurement, we'll get into a terrible game of adding bicarb, adding acid, and thinking we've overshot it all the time. So just stay calm and just check it again till you get the reading you want, because 9 times out of 10 you will. Anyway, it has settled at 5.3, so I could add a bit more acid and get it to 5.2, but I'm happy with that. That's well within the range, which is 5.2 to 5.6. So, right, I always like to have a quick look in my books to see if we're on the right track. And in this book, it talks a little bit about Oktoberfest. After the Bavarian summer brewing prohibition was introduced by the Wittelbachers, the ruling house of dukes, in 1553, Bavarian brewers started to make Märzen beer, a dark brown lager high in alcohol, as much as 6%, and loaded with hops to ensure its keeping qualities. Mashed in March, this beer was stored or lagered during the hot summer months in caves and cellars, packed with ice from the previous winter. Supplies were depleted as summer thirst grew. At the beginning of the new brewing season in September, any leftover Märzen was consumed liberally to clear the market and the vats and the casks for the fresh supplies. Was this an early version of Oktoberfest, he says. Now, in here, this is quite interesting. That talks about Märzen being quite similar to Vienna lager, and if you look at the numbers, that is broadly the same. It says, and they also sometimes Märzen is called Oktoberfest as well. Oktoberfest is the richest of European amber lagers, but it's not as malty or multi-sweet as traditional Bock. This is smooth, rich beer that starts with some multi-sweetness but finishes dry enough and light enough to drink in quantity, often served in steins. And it should never be cloying or too full. While balanced to the malt side, the hop bitterness helps keep the finish from being overly sweet. The most common fault in brewing this style is making it too big, too sweet, too alcoholic, or too hoppy. Blah, blah, blah. So he's saying, keep in mind, this should be a balanced beer with an emphasis on malt, flavour, and aroma. Oktoberfest gets its substantial, bready, toasty malt character from a large percentage of Munich malt. A portion of caramel malt adds some backing sweetness, but don't add too much. To get a dry enough finish, you need to get proper level of attenuation, so you want a good fermentation and good yeast pitch and so on. So just a bit of background on the style then. Should be balanced, should be bready, toasty, frothy, and should be served in litres. That's what take off from that. So we'll make sure we've got some big glasses ready for this. Right, boiling. Smells nice, but it's different to how the Festbier decoction smell, which I said was like the inside of a white loaf freshly baked when you break it open. But this is different. It smells more like, I guess, a wholemeal loaf. Get a cloth. There's no oats in it, but it smells a bit oaty. So we're at 60 at the moment. Let's see what adding these 2 pans full does to the temperature. Right, so it's circulating round. It's pretty clear, so I think we can probably transfer it now to kettle. looking good. Yeah, it looks nice and clear. Right, we're well in with the transfer and the sparge. Just rinsing all the wholemeal bread goodness out of these grains. Smells gorgeous. Different to my normal smell, as it were. Right, let's have a quick talk about the hops. This beer is quite lightly hopped to allow the malt to shine through. Style guidelines for Märzen are original gravity 1050 to 1057 and IBUs 20 to 28. And this one's coming in at 21.3, I think it is. So we've got 14.4 IBUs, International Bitterness Units, that stands for, coming from Hallertauer first wort hopping. That means we stick them in a minute. And then we've got a little addition at the end somewhere, a select spalt, which is 6.8 IBUs. So altogether that's 21.2 IBUs. So towards the lower end of the spectrum. Normally, if I was designing a beer and I was picking a style first, then I would hop to the high end of the spectrum just because I like hops. But this is a tried and tested recipe, so I'm not going to fiddle with it. And I'm looking forward to seeing how these turn out. I haven't used these exact hops before. I've used plenty of Hallertauer in the past, but Tradition is not one I've used, and same with the Select Spalt, so also interesting. Lots of learning for me today on this beer. 30 minutes left in the boil, so it's time to add the next hops. And these are Spalter Select. So Spalter Select is the result of a cross between Spalt and Hallertauer Mittelfrüh. It retains some of the finer characteristics of both these varieties and is considered a slightly spicier version of Spalt. Oh, yeah, this is putting me off. Brewing giant I can never say it, Anheuser-Busch replaced both Spalt and Tettnanger with Spalter Select. Yeah. Anyway, we'll whip them in. 100 grams, same as the first edition. Oops, we're 30 minutes from the 96 grams now. With 30 minutes from the end. So I'll whip these in now. Right, we're doing the whirlpool at the moment. I'm recirculating the hot water through the heat exchanger to just get it above 90, just to sanitize it. Whirlflock's already in. It's looking good. I'll check the gravity now, see if we're at the right sort of numbers. And then if it looks right, we'll be able to knock it out, as it were. So just transferring it into the fermenter now. And quite nice and clear. Right, it's all in the fermenter. The Märzen, and this is the W3470 yeast starter that I've made. Smells like yeast. So I'm going to stick that in. And the fermentation temperature range on this yeast is 12 to 18 degrees. And because we're quite keen to try and get this ready in 4 weeks if we can, which is quite a tough challenge, I'm going to have to ferment it towards the top of the range. So 17.5 I've set the thermostat for, which means it'll probably occasionally go up to about 18 as it adjusts. So that's why I set it half a degree below. Right, this is the Märzen. Probably, what are we? a week or so later, I think, from brewing it, and it's just ticking along nicely. Set it at 17.5, and we're also fermenting it under pressure. So I'm pleased with how it's progressing. Smells sulphury and so on, which is pretty normal. And I'm just going to check the gravity now, and then I'm going away for 2 weeks, so I'll just leave it to do its thing whilst we're away. So a couple of weeks later, we put the Märzen into these kegs, put them in the cold room to condition for another few weeks, and then finally it was time to taste this delicious German beer. So we're pulling it here through the Leukocyde pull tap because we can, and this helps to give this delicious thick creamy head with a sort of almost shiny top to it because the bubbles are so fine. And the beer's pouring a lovely coppery red colour, lovely colour coming from those specialty malts that we've used. And the head, of course, protects the beer. That's the point of the Leukocyde pull, to give this, I know it's a Czech system, but it works nicely on these kind of beers. It protects the beer from the oxygen in the air, keeps it from deteriorating even whilst it's in your glass. Although, of course, this beer is designed to serve to drink quickly, so it shouldn't deteriorate due to oxygenation in your glass, obviously. And the beer's called On the Bark Side, and that's a reflection of the bark malt variety that's been used to make the beer. So let's have a taste and see what we think. Guten Abend und herzlich willkommen zur Bierverkostung dieser Märzen. Here is the Märzen beer. It's an absolutely beautiful colour, sort of coppery colour, nice and clear, and it's presenting with a lovely head on it. And the smell is pretty much what we thought it would be from when we were doing that decoction mash. It's brown bread, slightly toasty, slightly caramelly, all on the nose, and it certainly smells inviting. Now then, Märzen is the original Oktoberfest beer, so in fact it actually used to be called Oktoberfest. Although Märzen style dates back further than Oktoberfest, because Oktoberfest started in about 1810. Prince Ludwig got married, and I guess he threw a street party, and it's sort of stuck ever since, back in 1810. So the Munich breweries are tremendously protectionist about Oktoberfest, and only 6 breweries are allowed to be involved in Oktoberfest. They've made up a rule that you have to draw your water from a well under Munich in order to qualify, but I do believe there's other breweries that now do that, and yet still there's only the 6 involved. Now, the 6 beers that are part of Oktoberfest are Hackerschwor, Augustiner, Hofbrau, Spaten, Paulaner, and Löwenbrau. And these are the famous 6, mostly big breweries, I think, now. And those are the ones that you can get in the Oktoberfest. Now, most of you will have seen Oktoberfest in steins, pale gold and yellow, and that's what we call a Festbier, which we've already done a video on. But this is the more traditional, the Märzen. Now then, it's supposed to get the job going a bit, so it's pretty strong, around about 6-ish%, and this one I think's come out at 5.7. But nevertheless, despite it being what we English and would think of as strong, not you chaps across the pond, you would see this as a session beer, no doubt, but we English would think of this as a really strong beer. In fact, if I put a beer on here in the tap room that's 5.9, for example, Jaipur, People don't come until it's gone because they're that scared of it. So we're a little bit out of our comfort zone here. We like to quaff 4% beers down as fast as we can. But in fact, in Oktoberfest, the tradition is to quaff this very fast in litre glasses, not steins, because that's actually the earthenware mug, but I think they call them a Märzen glass, which I haven't got one. I ashamedly haven't got one. I must get some ready for the Oktoberfest. So I've got it in a nice pint mug. Now then, the smell, we've already said bread, caramel, possibly toast. Let's go in for mouthfeel. Yeah, now it doesn't have a heavy mouthfeel. This is part of the idea that this beer has to be drinkable. So it's actually deceptively light. It's certainly not watery, but it's medium to light body, I would say. And let's have a look into the taste. Well, it's interesting. So it's not what I would call horribly sweet like, and forgive me for saying this if you like them, but something like a Dunkel is quite malty and sweet. But this is malty, but it's backed up with some bitterness. So I would say it's actually quite balanced. So your first taste is the breadiness and sweetness, kind of caramel, but then the hops kick in at the back of your mouth, and you feel that sort of firm bitterness that it's not as bitter as other beers, of course, but it's enough to balance the beer and make it if you want a beer that's going to be quaffed, it's got to be a beer that where you have a taste and you want another one. And not all beers are like that, believe it or not, although most of them appear to be to me when I've got them in my hand. But so it's balanced, it's easily quaffable, delicate layers of bread, sweetness, caramel. The malts are very impressive, the Barke variety of Barley. Be interesting to do a side-by-side not using Barke. So I'm absolutely delighted with that. Now, of course, this beer won't be to everyone's taste. Some would find it a bit brown, some would find it perhaps a bit sweet. And of course, this means that we need to do a balanced portfolio of beers ready for Oktoberfest. So, last week we did the Festbier, the most famous beer, if you like, now of Oktoberfest. This week we've done the Märzen, the most traditional. Next week we're going to do a Weizen, which doesn't feature prominently perhaps in the tents, but it's a very traditional Munich beer. And after that we're going to do a German Pilsner as well. And then, just to get a lovely portfolio of excessive number of beers so that nobody's got any excuse for not liking them, or at least liking one of them, I'm going to do a Keller beer. In fact, not just any Keller beer, but an Austrian style Keller beer known as a Schwickel. So I'm hoping that that will give us an extremely broad and exciting and balanced portfolio for the Oktoberfest party, when I'll invite a few neighbours round to have a taste. But really pleased with this beer, and just remains for me to finish it off and say, frothing ale, cheers.